Hello. So my name, as he said, is Christian. I have been with Enonic for 7 years now, and I love TypeScript. Today I'm going to talk a bit about React4XP. I'll start with when do you want to use this? Basically, if you want to use React, of course, with Enonic, and you need to do server-side rendering. So because, for instance, if you want your site to be available on, you need to have server-side rendering, because not all crawlers support like dynamic generated content. Also, maybe you want fast pages, so it loads quickly in the browser rather than spending a lot of time on generating or rendering on the client side. Maybe your customers have like an old mobile phone, so you want less client processing. And in addition, we just heard about Next.js, so maybe you don't want the complexity of third-party frameworks. And then what is React4XP? So I tried to like put it down to one sentence. So it's an SDK for server-side React on Enonic XP. So, but it does, of course, more than server-side rendering. So the main part of it is a library, a Java library, which contains the coding API, the rendering engine, some application configuration, and like services for hosting assets. And then there are two npm packages. This one is basically the build system, so that it can take your React code and make it runnable in React4XP. And also we have now, in version 4, we have added a type npm package, so that you can have auto-completion and all the nice things that I will talk about later in TypeScript. So how do you use this? Well, if you're starting from scratch, you can simply use the starter. And everything, the libs and the npm packages are just set up for you, and you can start programming right away. But if you want to like adapt an existing project, basically what you have to do is compare with how the starter looks and like set up the build system, import the Java library, set up Gradle tasks. So a lot of small things you have to do. Then you have to import and use the render function in your controllers, code React components, and the normal build and deploy. So I stole this from Pavel's slides. A little bit about how like you use Enonic with like page components. So you can actually have like, this could be React, and this could be timeless. So you can combine different types of components in the same page. And now let's try to put together some code, like if it goes together. So here's a JavaScript example. This is a part controller, hello world. Basically, you require from the library, and you use the render function. Pretty simple. You can have some props and stuff. We will look into that soon. Here is the JSX file. I have used the term React4XP entry here instead of React component. And there is a reason for this. So because you can have as many React components nested inside each other as you want, but you can only have like one root entry. So there's one entry per Enonic component. That's why I have this term React4XP entry. So this is a very simple React component. All it does is say a paragraph with hello world. And then we have this line down here. This is needed because so that the React4XP runtime understands that, oh, this is actually a component, not just a JavaScript function. So it's important to have this last line here. So we move on to the same example, just that now it's in ECMAScript. Now we can just import the named function directly. You don't need to import the entire library. And you do as before, you just render. In addition, I have added a input type text to this part with name. And I just pass this on via props. And now we can, in the component, just use props name. So now we don't have hello world, now we have hello Christian, hello, yeah, anything. And then it's time to look at TypeScript. What on earth is this? So, yeah, it's sort of like a weird thing where you can put types inside your JavaScript code. So once you start using it, it's weird, but once you get used to it, it's beautiful. So basically here is a type declaration file. Notice the DTS here. So what I have done, I've sent that, oh, my part, it has one property, which was name, and that's a string, right? Very simple. And then I have in the props, I have a text property. That's also a string. And what's cool about this now is that we can import this directly in our controller code. So here we import the types, and we can use them directly in here. So what's cool about this now is if I were to hover name here, it would tell me, oh, this is a string. And again, text, oh, it's a string. And here you can like, hello, name, like from here directly. And if I now try to write like a number here, it will say, you idiot. And it will say it while you're coding instead of in production. So that's a huge improvement. You get it right away on your screen. And also it's very nice because of this type library now. Whenever I write render here, oh, it will show me what components are, props are, requests are. Everything has types. And you can do the same in the React controller, or say React entry. You can also import the types here and use them same way. So again, this will be a string. So it's very nice. Yeah. So that's one of the major things in React4XP 4 is that you can use TypeScript. So a little bit more about some features in version 4 is render options. Basically, when you make some React component, the default mode is server-side rendered with hydration. So hydration basically just means that, let's say you have a button and it's server-side rendered. All you see on your page then is a button, and you can't click it, right? But when it's hydrated, now it's interactive. It has something behind it. You can click it. So therefore, you can even turn off hydration. So why would you do this? Well, if you have no interactivity in your parts, you just want pure server-side rendering, nothing past of JavaScript to the browser, which is the absolute fastest thing you can do. So they can say, okay, this component, it's pure server-side. So off with the hydration. But you can also do the opposite. Okay, this component is pure client-side. So why is that useful? Well, there are some frameworks, like for instance, Material UI, which has functionality in it, which requires a browser environment to run. It's not possible to run it on the server side. And then you say, okay, this is a Material UI component. I will only render in the client side. So this is cool. This was not possible before. So that's amazing now. But these were per component. You can also do it in application config. And now you do it for the entire application. So instead of saying this and this and this and this is of this type, now everything else is. So you change what is the default rendering. Okay, I want everything client-side rendered. So you do that in app config. Now everything is client. But you say, okay, everything except this one part. Because this one part I want server-side. Okay, then you set for the whole application in app config. This is client-side. And then you override it in one component to say, oh, this is client-side. No, server-side, sorry. Yeah. So this is very useful. More things that React4XP does. It also has what we call static assets. It's sort of what was talked about in the Next.js presentation, where the page is static, but this time it's the asset that is static. So why do we do that? Well, basically because requests are slow, takes a long time. And you maybe heard the famous quote from Einstein, doing the same thing multiple times and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. So they're also wasteful. If you already have the asset, why load it one more time? That's pointless. And it's costly. Maybe you have a expensive mobile arrangement, or you're on the boat to Denmark, or you're a cloud provider. So you don't want all your customers to download the same thing again and again and again, because that is costly. And there is also a fourth concern here. Like some companies, they have a security policy which says that, okay, we are not allowed to host assets on a CDN. So now you can host it easily inside React4XP. And what you basically achieve then is immutable URLs. What that means is behind this URL, you always get exactly the same thing. And if that thing changes, then it's actually a new URL. So this means that on the browser you have infinite caching. Yeah, it's very nice. So I can explain a little bit about what the difference is between the normal Enonic assets. So whenever you put some files into the assets folder in Enonic, they are sort of immutable URLs as well. So the difference is that those assets in the URL, you will see there is a number there, a fingerprint. And this fingerprint changes every time you build. So every time you make a new jar file, it's a new number. So even though the actual asset is identical, no changes in it, it's a new URL. So what you're doing then, download the same thing multiple times. So therefore, it's no longer a fingerprint in like a common URL endpoint. Now the fingerprint is per asset. As you see here, yeah. You don't see the NASPender on my screen, I guess. Funny. Yeah, so here is a content hash, the same here. So how do we do this, as you say, the content hash? The React4XP build system will take your files, it will make a hash sum for them, and add that to the file name. And it will also make like a stats or manifest file, so that it can look up, okay, I want the client.js, that's this file. So when it generates URLs for you, it adds that hash to them. And what's also cool, now we have done this in React4XP, but you can do this in any Enonic app by using lib-static. So you can set this up for yourself. So you have like static assets. Yeah. So here's an example of that. This is the first page load. You see, now it loads a lot of things, 1.5 megabytes in total, and it takes a little bit per request, right? But if you load the page one more time, oh, now like everything is from cache and 0 milliseconds, and the total now is just 125 kilobytes. So that's quite a huge improvement. Yeah. So what's new? I already mentioned TypeScript. Everything is made in TypeScript now, more or less, except for the Java parts of it. And everything you code can also be TypeScript. In addition, we have now native support for React 18. Before it supported React 18, but it ran in like compatibility mode, which meant it was actually sort of React 17 in 18. But now it's pure React 18. We have done some improvement to Content Studio. I will show you this soon in a demo. We also dropped support for Nashorn and are now using only GraalVM. Just notice that this is only for like the React, not for the Enonic code. Yeah. Also, we did an improvement in the build system. We're still using Webpack, but we switched out the Babel loader with SVC. So that is a lot faster. We also have some plans in the roadmap, which I will mention soon. And then we no longer do eager loading. we do lazy loading, which means that nothing is loaded before you actually need it. And this we actually had to do again for things like Material UI, where it tries to load things in the server that doesn't exist there. So you only load it if you need it, and since you're doing client-side rendering, it works. Yeah. So a little bit comparison between React4XP and Next.xp. React4XP runs directly on Enonic. You don't need to set up 2 servers, right? Next.xp requires a separate node server. So all the communication is on localhost, means you send a request, you get a response. No extra API traffic between servers in the background. So that's quite fast. But here is where Next is better than us. Next.xp has static generation. We don't have that. Yet. Yeah. And again, Next.xp, it has hot loading. And again, we don't have that yet. So this is also something we have on the roadmap. Both of them do server-side rendering. Both of them do TypeScript. Both of them do routing. In addition, Pavel showed the slide with all these boxes. So Next.xp is it has a huge ecosystem, or Next.js. So while React4XP is more like specifically for Enonic. Yeah. So who's using it? We have Posten and Bring, and we have SSB. And I will actually show their pages. Yeah. So here is the Posten page. Not the entire page, but several parts of it. Is using React4XP, like this button down here, and this search result here. And these are actually components from 2 different apps. So that's also pretty cool. And then you have like the SSB page. Again, a lot of React components, React4XP. Yeah. And then I wanted to show market. So this here, what you're looking at here, everything is React4XP. Yeah. It's pretty cool. So here you can see it's interactive. You can click this button and stuff happens. And when you go into Content Studio, if it loads, yeah. Basically you have the same here. Now this also works. So this is one of the improvements we did in version 4. Is that you can now have interactive mode here. Before it was pure static page there. But if I edit this now, if I now try to click this, oh, now it didn't change the image. Now it actually come up with some properties for this component. So what the difference is here is that this is now not hydrated. It's just the server-side rendered HTML and CSS, no JavaScript. And the reason this is done is so that the interactivity doesn't collide with the editing interface of Content Studio. So now I can drag and drop this like any normal part. Yeah.
Christian, you're on the production side, so please don't say.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so the roadmap, what's next? I talked about build performance. We're using Webpack with SVC now. We plan to move to TS up with ES build, which is even much faster. So on my machine, sometimes I build in like 2 seconds, whereas before it took me a minute. So that's quite an improvement. We also want to have hot loading when you're running XP in dev mode. And we want to improve how we support multiple React4XP apps on the same page, like Posten does. Yeah, I think that's it. Anybody have questions? How are we on time?
And by the way, if you are on an earlier version of React4XP, you have the migration guide, which should help you to migrate to version 4. So please use that.
Yeah. Since there are not many questions, I can say a little bit more about compilation time, because I mentioned TS up here. We're also going to come out with a new starter for like generic Enonic projects, which uses TS up. So then you don't have to wait forever all the time. So I hope to come with news about that soon. Because, yeah. Yeah, okay.